Welcome to Screams from the Vault, where we unearth the darkest tales from history. Tonight's story takes us back 300 years to Georgian England, a tale of betrayal, lust, and murder. This is the crime of Catherine Hayes, a woman whose brutal act made her one of the last to be burned alive in Britain. Lock your doors, turn down the lights, and let's open the vault.
In the early 1700s, England was a place ruled by rigid hierarchies, where women were seen as property, and a husband's authority was considered sacred. So, if a woman killed her husband, it wasn't simply murder, it was treason. Petty treason was defined by the Treason Act of 1351, and it meant killing one's superior. A servant murdering a master, a priest killing his bishop, or a wife killing her husband. These acts weren't just seen as crimes against a person, but as an assault on the order of the universe itself. The punishment reflected that belief. Men convicted of petty treason were hanged, drawn, and quartered. Women were burned alive. And in 1725, Catherine Hayes earned that fate. Catherine was born around 1690 in Birmingham, England. At 15, she ran away from home, a young girl alone in a brutal world. She survived by working as a prostitute, serving officers and travelers wherever she could. Eventually, she bore a child, a son she named Thomas. Years later, at 23, Catherine became a maid for a farmer named John Hayes. He was hardworking, respected, and stable. Everything Catherine was not. But soon, she seduced his eldest son, John Jr., and the two married in secret. At first, life on the farm was peaceful, but for Catherine, peace was never enough. In 1719, she convinced her husband to move to London. There, he became a successful pawnbroker and moneylender. They lived comfortably, servants, fine clothes, parties, but greed is never satisfied. Catherine demanded more and more money, and when her husband refused, resentment began to rot their marriage. By 1725, everything had fallen apart. That same year, they took in a lodger, an 18-year-old tailor named Thomas Billings. What her husband didn't know was that Thomas was actually Catherine's illegitimate son, and before long, she began sleeping with him. Then came another lodger, a butcher named Thomas Wood, a friend of her husband. It didn't take long for her to start an affair with him, too. Now, under one roof, lived Catherine Hayes, her husband John, her secret son and lover, Thomas Billings, and her second lover, Thomas Wood. A house dripping with secrets, jealousy, and blood. Catherine decided she wanted her husband gone. Divorce was impossible, and leaving him meant poverty. So she chose another path: death. On the night of March 1st, 1725, John Hayes went drinking at a local pub with the two Thomases. They made bets, laughed, and drank until he could barely stand. When they returned home, John stumbled into bed and quickly passed out. Then, the plan began. Billings crept into the bedroom and brought down an axe on John's head. The sound of the blow and John's screams were heard by their upstairs neighbor, Mrs. Springate, who rushed downstairs to check. But Catherine, calm as ice, told her not to worry. They were just having a party. Mrs. Springate went back upstairs. Down below, the two men finished what they started. Then they began the unsinkable. Using the butcher's knives, Thomas Wood and Billings dismembered John's body. His head was cut off, wrapped in cloth, and placed in a bucket. The rest of his remains were chopped into pieces. That night, under the cover of darkness, they dumped the body parts in a pond in Marybone Fields. Then they carried the head to the River Thames and threw it into the black water. But the river rejected it. Days later, boatmen discovered the severed head, its skull fractured in 2 places, its face slashed beyond recognition. The head was placed on a spike outside St. Margaret's churchyard, and soon it was identified as John Hayes.
When questioned, Catherine claimed her husband had gone away on business. Then she changed her story, saying he'd killed a man and fled the country. But her lies began to unravel. A family friend named Mr. Ashby, suspicious of her story, went to the police. When officers arrived at the Hayes home, they found Catherine in bed with her son. Both were arrested. Thomas Wood tried to flee, but was captured days later. As the investigation continued, they found John's remaining body parts, and the truth became impossible to deny. The case of Catherine Hayes shocked London, not only because of the savagery of the crime, but because she had killed her husband, her master, in the eyes of the law. She was charged with petty treason. Her son, Thomas Billings, and Thomas Wood were charged with murder. Catherine confessed, blaming the devil for her actions. The court was unmoved. On April 23, 1726, the jury found all 3 guilty. Billings and Wood were sentenced to hang. Catherine was sentenced to something far worse, to be drawn to Tyburn on a hurdle and burned alive. On May 9, 1726, the crowd gathered. Thousands of onlookers, drawn by the rare spectacle of a woman's execution by fire. Catherine was tied to a stake near Tyburn Gallows. A rope was looped around her neck, meant to strangle her before the flames reached her. As the executioner lit the pyre, she screamed, begging him to pull the rope tight. But the wind changed direction. The flames surged toward him, burning his hands, forcing him to drop the cord. The fire engulfed her. Witnesses said she gave 3 dreadful shrieks before her voice was lost in the roar of the flames. Her hands tried to push the fire away until they too were consumed. In a moment of mercy, or horror, the executioner hurled a block of wood at her head, crushing her skull. It took over an hour for her body to be reduced to ashes. There is no grave for Catherine Hayes, no marker, only her story, a grim reminder of the darkness that once lived behind closed doors in London's crowded streets. She was the last woman in England to be burned alive for killing her husband, her name etched forever in the archives of blood and betrayal. And that is the story of Catherine Hayes, the woman who turned love into treason. If you enjoyed tonight's descent into history's darkest corners, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss another scream from the vault. Until next time, sleep well.